I did 6 years at a state prison in southern Texas, mostly for burglary and possession. It wasn't my first time behind bars, but it was the first time I ever felt real fear inside a cell. You get used to violence, yelling, the smell of sweat and bleach, but not to silence. And in that place, silence had weight. I was sent to solitary, the hole, for fighting. It wasn't even much of a fight, just me and another guy shoving over a poker dead. But the guards wanted to make a point. They took me down 2 floors, past the normal units, into a hallway that always smelled like wet concrete. No sunlight, no airflow, just cold. The guard, a tall man named Jenkins, didn't even look at me when he shoved me inside the cell. The door clanged shut behind me, and I stood there, adjusting to the dark. The only light came from a thin strip at the bottom of the door. The cell had a toilet, a metal bed frame, and nothing else. It took a few minutes for my eyes to adjust, and that's when I noticed something strange. A patch of darker shadow on the far wall, down near the floor. It looked like dampness, except it moved. At first, I thought it was my imagination. When you've been in a lit area all day and get thrown into pitch black, your eyes play tricks. But the sound, that's what got me. A slow scraping, like nails dragging lightly across concrete. Not loud, just enough to raise the hairs on my arms. I froze and listened. The sound stopped. I sat on the bed, my back against the wall. My heartbeat echoed in that small space. After a while, I tried to sleep. You lose track of time fast in solitary. There's no clock, no windows. You only know it's morning when they slide food through the slot. That first night, I woke up to a whisper. It sounded like my name. Eddie. I sat straight up, heart pounding. The cell was dark, same as before. I told myself I was dreaming, but then I heard it again, this time closer. I pressed my back harder against the wall and whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. The next morning, when my tray slid in, I tried to ask the guard outside, a different one this time, if anyone else was down here. He looked confused. "You're alone in this block," he said. "Ain't nobody else assigned here right now." That didn't make sense. The night before, I heard chains dragging in the next cell, and something that sounded like coughing, but I kept my mouth shut. You don't want to sound crazy down there. Once you do, they'll leave you in solitary longer. That night, the whisper came back. This time, it wasn't saying my name. It was talking to itself. A fast, mumbling voice, like someone arguing under their breath. It came from the far corner, near that darker spot on the wall. I turned toward it and squinted. The shadow seemed deeper, thicker than before. I picked up my metal cup and threw it at the wall. The clang echoed, but the shadow didn't move. The voice stopped, though. Dead silent. I remember curling up on the bed and covering my ears. I was shaking. When they brought breakfast, I begged to talk to Jenkins, the guard who'd put me here. He finally came by around noon. I told him something wasn't right in the cell, that I heard voices, that someone was in there with me. He looked at me like I'd lost it. Then he said something that didn't make sense at the time. "Don't go near the vent." Then he walked off. I didn't even realize what he meant until that night. There was a small vent near the floor, under that dark spot. It didn't blow air, but I could hear faint sounds coming through, like whispering, distant moaning, or crying. I got down on my hands and knees to listen. What I heard made my stomach turn. A voice said, "They left me here." It wasn't a whisper. It was clear, like someone talking right behind the wall. I stumbled back and kicked at the vent. It rattled but didn't come loose. That's when I noticed scratch marks all along the floor leading toward it. long, deep gouges in the concrete, like fingernails dragged until they broke. Some of them had dried blood in them. I spent the rest of that night standing. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear breathing that wasn't mine. The next morning, I refused my tray. The guard outside didn't care. Around what I guessed was evening, I saw movement, a shadow that crossed the strip of light under the door. I thought maybe it was Jenkins checking on me, so I called out. No answer. The light stayed blocked for a few seconds, then disappeared, but the door never opened. That night I broke. I started yelling, banging on the metal door, screaming that I wasn't alone. Nobody came. I yelled until my throat burned. Then, from the vent, I heard laughter. Slow, wet, choking laughter. I backed into the corner, shaking. The laughter went on and on until I started crying. When I woke up, the cell light was on. First time I'd seen it lit. Jenkins stood outside, holding his baton. My hands and knees were raw and bleeding. I must have scratched the floor in my sleep. He didn't say anything, just told me I was being released from solitary early. As I walked out, I turned back and looked at the wall near the vent. The dark patch was gone, but scratched above the vent were words I swear weren't there before. They hear you too. I didn't ask questions. A few years later, when I was out, I met another ex-inmate who'd done time in the same prison. When I told him I'd spent a week in the hole, he went pale. He said that block had been shut down for years after a prisoner hung himself in one of the cells. He'd been left undiscovered for days because no guard wanted to check the noise complaints. They thought it was just pipes. I asked what cell it was. He said the number without hesitation, cell 4D. That was mine. I worked as a correctional officer at an old state prison in southern Ohio from 2004 to 2011. It wasn't the kind of place you brag about working in. Half the lights flickered, the paint peeled from every wall, and the heating system clanked like it was alive. We were always short on staff, so rookies like me got tossed straight into night shifts on C Block, the wing everyone hated. C Block was where they kept long-term inmates, mostly lifers, a few waiting for transfers. It always felt different from the other wings. The air smelled damp, like rusted pipes and mildew. The doors were heavier too, older design, still with manual locks. Most nights, I did rounds with a flashlight and a clipboard, counting cells, making sure everyone was accounted for. On my third week there, I first heard about the man in C-23. The senior officer, Howard, told me during lunch, "Just don't freak out if that door's open," he said casually, like he was giving weather advice. "What do you mean open?" I asked. He shrugged. "You'll see." I didn't think much of it until my fourth night on C Block. It was after 2 a.m., the time when the building goes dead quiet. I was walking the row, tapping on bars as we do, counting heads. When I reached C-23, the door was cracked open about 2 inches. Every other door on the row was locked tight. I leaned forward and shone my flashlight inside. The cell was empty. Bed made, tray on the floor. No inmate. I checked the roster, see. 23 belonged to a man named Earl Simmons, but he wasn't on my count sheet. I called the control room. "Did we move Simmons tonight?" They paused, then came back with, "Simmons? There's no one by that name here." I double-checked the sheet. His name was typed, not handwritten. Cell C-23. I thought maybe it was a clerical error, maybe some record from before I started. Still, protocol said to close and lock any open doors, so I pushed it shut, turned the key, and marked it secure. But when I came back 30 minutes later on my second pass, it was open again. That time, I felt it. The kind of cold you don't get from broken vents. My flashlight flickered once, then steadied. I closed the door again, maybe harder than I needed to, and kept walking. The next morning, I asked Howard, who used to be in that cell. He just said, Simmons hanged himself there back in '99. They never reassigned it, but the paperwork keeps bringing him back. I laughed, tried to play it off. You're saying the system prints ghost names? Howard didn't laugh. No, I'm saying someone keeps signing his name during head count. I didn't believe him until a week later. That night, I was filling out my 3 a.m. log when the lights dimmed for a second. Nothing unusual, the power tripped all the time. But when they came back, my count sheet had another line written on it in pencil, faint and shaky. C23, Simmons, present. No one had been near me. I was alone in the control booth. I crumpled the sheet, started fresh, and didn't report it. I didn't want to be the new guy bringing ghost stories to morning briefing. The real trouble started 2 nights later. I was walking past C23 again when I heard the sound of metal scraping, like someone slowly dragging a cup across the bars. I stopped. My flashlight caught movement inside, a figure sitting on the bunk. I froze. The man was slumped forward, wearing a standard inmate uniform, head bowed like he was asleep sitting up. Hey, I barked. You're not supposed to be in there. He didn't move. I stepped closer, and the beam caught his neck, a deep purple band all the way around it. Then the light flickered and went out. When it came back on, the bunk was empty. I backed away so fast I hit the opposite wall. I radioed it in, voice shaking. The officers on duty searched the whole block. Not a single cell was open, and no one unaccounted for. After that, I avoided that row when I could. But once you're assigned to C block, you don't get to choose. I started hearing things every night, whispers, soft tapping, a low voice humming a tune I didn't recognize. One night, I was checking the top tier when I noticed a shadow stretching out from C23. The light from the hallway couldn't reach that far, yet the shadow moved like someone pacing. I stared until my eyes hurt. Then it just stopped, and the air smelled faintly like burnt cloth. A month later, I switched shifts with another guard named Luis. I didn't tell him why. 2 days later, he came into work pale as paper. He said the door to C23 had been open again, and when he went to close it, a man inside whispered, "Don't." Luis said he saw him clear as day. Short hair, uniform, rope burns. After that, no one volunteered for nights on that tier. The warden had maintenance weld the door shut. Officially, the reason was structural safety. Unofficially, no one wanted to hear that cell open again. When the prison finally closed in 2013, a bunch of us went back to help transfer records. I couldn't resist checking the old roster one last time. There it was, printed neat as ever, C23, Earl Simmons. Someone had signed next to his name. Same faint, shaky handwriting I'd seen years earlier. I don't believe in ghosts, not really. But I'll tell you this, it wasn't something usual. I was serving 5 years for auto theft in 2010. Most of that time was in a medium security facility in Oklahoma. but near the end of my sentence, I got transferred to another state for a court appearance tied to an old charge. The ride to that new facility was the most terrifying night I've ever lived through, and it still doesn't make sense to this day. Prison transport sounds straightforward. You get cuffed, loaded into a van, and moved with a few other inmates under guard supervision. But this was no regular ride. It was an overnight trip through back roads to save time, run by 2 officers I didn't recognize. There were 6 of us chained in the back, 2 on each bench, 1 in the middle seat, and 1 in the far back corner. A quiet older guy with a gray beard and a shaved head. None of us spoke much. It was cold inside, even though it was late summer. The air smelled like old vinyl and bleach. The floor had grooves filled with dried mud and something darker I didn't want to identify. The van pulled out just before sundown. The guards didn't play music or talk. They just drove in silence. After an hour, I started noticing something strange. The man in the back corner wasn't moving at all. His head leaned to one side, eyes half closed. I thought maybe he was sleeping, but his mouth was slightly open, and he wasn't breathing. The guy next to him, a tall inmate named Dale, nudged him with his elbow. No response. "Hey man," Dale said quietly. "You good?" Nothing. We all looked at each other. Nobody wanted to make noise because one of the guards would snap at you for talking. But even they must have noticed something was off. The rearview mirror tilted down a few times. Then, the driver muttered something to the other guard, and we slowed down. The van stopped on a dirt turnout, surrounded by trees. One of the guards got out, walked around back, and opened the doors. He shined his flashlight right on the old man. "Jesus Christ," he said under his breath. The man wasn't breathing. His skin looked pale like paper. The guard checked his neck, then cursed. He turned to the other officer. "He's gone." The driver said, "We're in the middle of nowhere. We can't radio this in here." They argued for a bit, but we couldn't hear everything. Then they shut the doors again and got back in front. The van started rolling. Nobody said a word for a long time. All you could hear was the road and the metal chains clinking as we shifted. I thought they'd head straight to the next county jail, but instead we kept driving deeper into nowhere. About half an hour later, the temperature dropped fast. I could see my breath. The windows fogged up, even though the vents were off. Then, the old man in the back made a sound. It wasn't a groan. It was a deep exhale, like air forced out of lungs that hadn't worked in years. Everyone froze. Dale turned around first and said, "Hey, no way." The man's head was upright now. His chin tilted slightly, and his eyes were open, cloudy, and unfocused. The smell hit next, sharp, metallic, like rotting meat and ammonia. One of the inmates started shouting for the guards. They didn't stop the van. I don't think they could hear us over the road. Then came a sound I'll never forget. The chains on the old man's wrists scraped the floor as he stood. The problem was, he shouldn't have been able to. He was cuffed to the rail. The cuffs were still in place, but his hands were free. He didn't move like a person. He leaned forward too far, like his body didn't know where to stop. I kicked at the wall to make noise, yelling for the guards to stop. The other inmates started shouting too. The van swerved suddenly, and we all slammed against the sides. The driver finally pulled over again. The guards came back with flashlights, both on edge. When they opened the doors, the smell hit them hard. One gagged, the other drew his taser, but there was nothing to see. The old man was back in his seat, head down again, hands cuffed exactly as before. The guard looked at us. "If anyone's screwing around, I'll make sure you regret it." Nobody said a word. They slammed the doors and kept driving. After that, the van went quiet again, but I could feel something wrong with the air, like it got heavier, harder to breathe. Around midnight, we stopped for fuel at a small rural station. One of the guards got out to pay. The others stood watch. The station lights flickered, and that's when I saw it. The old man's head turned toward me. Not fast, just slow and deliberate. His eyes were open again, cloudy and gray. He mouthed something, but there was no sound. The guard outside must have seen my face through the grate. He came over, opened the door, and yelled, "What's going on back here?" When he looked, the seat was empty. Gone. The chains were still hanging, cuffs closed. No broken metal, no open latch. They tore the van apart for almost an hour. Nothing. The driver wanted to call it in, but the other officer said, "We can't report a missing dead man." I could tell he was terrified. They made us all sign a statement when we arrived at the next facility. No incidents during transport. None of us argued. 2 weeks later, word spread that one of the guards from that trip quit the job. The other was found dead in his home. Heart failure, they said, but the body had bruises around the wrists, like someone had held him down. I never forgot that ride. Sometimes, when I can't sleep, I hear the rattle of those chains in my head, steady and slow, like they're sliding across metal. When I was finally released, I tried to find out who that old man was. I asked a friend who still worked in the system to pull the transport manifest. He called me a few days later. "There's no record of a sixth inmate on that van," he said. "Only 5 names. You sure you're remembering right?" I was. And I'll never take a quiet ride at night.